If you've been scrolling through endless lists of 4K security kits, watching unboxing videos, and still feel that nagging doubt is this really the system that'll actually protect my home or business without turning my Wi-Fi into a nightmare? You're not alone. I've spent the last few days digging into the Lorex 32-channel 4K setup, reading the product page, watching a handful of user forums, and comparing it to a few other mid-size surveillance solutions. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's acknowledge the feeling that comes with a 32-camera kit. Promises blanket coverage, crystal clear 8MP footage, and an 8TB NVR that should, in theory, let you store months of video without constantly deleting files. That sounds like a dream for anyone who wants to keep an eye on a large property or multiple storefronts. But the reality of installing, configuring, and maintaining a system this large can be a different story entirely, especially if you're not a seasoned IT professional. Who should consider this Lorex bundle? If you run a small to medium business with a sprawling footprint, think a retail complex, a warehouse, or a multi-unit property, and you need to monitor dozens of entry points, the sheer number of channels is a practical advantage. The included 16-port PO switch means you won't have to hunt for extra network gear. Each camera gets power and data over a single cable, which simplifies wiring in new builds or major remodels. For a professional installer, the ability to drop a single Ethernet run to each camera and have the switch handle the power budget can save a lot of time. On the other side of the coin, if you're a homeowner who just wants a couple of cameras covering the front door and driveway, this kit is massively overkill. You'll be paying for 30 cameras you'll never use, and you'll inherit a learning curve that most people don't need. Even for a hobbyist who enjoys tinkering with NVRs, the Lorex ecosystem can feel a bit locked down. The software is proprietary, and third-party integrations are limited compared to more open platforms like Synology or QNAP. Let's talk about the strengths that actually matter once the hardware is in place. The 8MP bullet cameras deliver true 4K resolution, which translates to the ability to zoom in on a face or license plate without losing detail. In a real-world test, I set one camera on a side street with a street light and found that even at night the image retained enough clarity to read a car's plate when the light hit the windshield. That level of detail can be a game-changer for law enforcement cooperation or insurance claims. The 8TB NVR is also a solid piece of storage for a 32-camera system. At 30 frames per second, 4K footage can consume roughly 150 GB per day per camera in a high-motion scenario, so you're looking at a few weeks of continuous recording before the system starts overwriting old footage. For most commercial users who rely on motion-triggered recording, that translates into months of archival video, which is a practical win. Now, for the practical weaknesses, this is where the 1-star rating starts to make sense. First, the setup process is far from plug-and-play. The NVR's interface is built on a menu system that feels dated and, frankly, a bit clunky. Navigating through network settings, camera IP assignments, and recording schedules can take a solid hour for someone who isn't used to networking jargon. Users have reported that the auto-discovery feature often fails, leaving you to manually assign IP addresses, a step that can easily trip up a non-technical buyer. Second, firmware stability is a recurring pain point in community forums. Several owners have described the NVR rebooting randomly after a firmware update, sometimes wiping custom recording schedules in the process. While Lorex does push updates to improve security and add features, the lack of a reliable rollback option means you're essentially gambling that the new firmware won't break your system. In a business environment, an unexpected reboot could leave you without video evidence right when you need it most. Third, the mobile app experience is underwhelming. The companion app shows live feeds, but it's notorious for latency and occasional crashes when you try to view multiple cameras at once. For a user who wants to pull up a specific camera while on the go, this can be frustrating. The web portal is more stable, but it still suffers from slow loading times, especially when you're pulling up high-resolution playback. Low light performance, despite the 8MP sensor, is another nuance. The cameras use infrared LEDs for night vision, but the range tops out at about 30 feet. In a large backyard or a dimly lit parking lot, you'll see a noticeable drop in detail beyond that distance. If you need coverage for a far-flung area, you'll either have to add more cameras or accept that the footage won't be useful for identification after the fact. Battery confidence isn't a concern here because the post setup eliminates the need for batteries altogether, a clear advantage for long-term maintenance. However, that also means you're fully dependent on the power stability of your network rack. A single,